going on, everybody? Here we are for another Wednesday, another Q&A day, my favorite episode every week. It is truly an honor when people ask me a question and want to hear my thoughts on it, especially since these are just opinions. So it's certainly not something where I'm right or I'm wrong, although some people have clearly told me before that my opinion is wrong. And hey, maybe it's not a very good opinion, but at least it was my opinion at that time. And a lot of opinions change. We all are constantly changing things. In fact, one of our questions today is sort of about that topic of changing opinions. If you're a person who has listened to the channel for a while, watched the channel for a while, and you've not yet asked a Q&A question, I really hope you'll do that. I get really excited genuinely when I see a question coming from a name that I don't recognize as having asked a question before. So if you're one of those people who haven't yet asked a question, it's just simply in the comments below, just type out your question. I would love to hear what you all are interested in. And if you asked a question and it wasn't used this week, it doesn't mean it was a bad question. All it means is I do 5, so that's not a 3-hour, thing. So just ask the same question again down below in this week's comments. If it's a question that I recognize as having come before, then it moves to the top of the list for that week. So please submit your questions. Now, I did get a couple gifts here, some really cool cards from Chris. He sent me this. I mean, any card that comes from a Kraft mac and cheese container, which is, I think, where this came from. It says Kraft Dinners. That is a cool card. I love that one. He also sent me a couple others. Got Clemens in a Red Sox uniform, and then my guy with the high pants, the high socks in the Yankee uniform, and then one more in a Red Sox uniform. So Chris, thank you for those. You've been a commenter for a while. I always appreciate your comments, and that was a super kind gift. Thank you so much. Let's take a look at this week's first question. For my question, you need to get into a time machine and travel back to the first moment you decided to create content on YouTube. What are the 3 biggest changes about the way you collect since that time? Thank you for taking my call. I'll hang up and listen to your response. All right, a question from my buddy Mookie Chilson. Love Mookie. You guys know I love Mookie. Mookie comments a lot on a lot of different channels, a lot of different videos, and he always has great comments. In fact, it seems like every weekend as I'm watching some of the, different conversations and stuff, whenever Dr. Beckett is on, literally, it seems like every single time Dr. Beckett comments on what a great comment Mookie has every week. It's like clockwork once a week. He is a creative guy, a smart guy, and I love his style. Now, this question from Mr. Chilson. Well, first off, I would say almost everything about the way I collect has changed. And the question is since I first started my YouTube channel. So if I had a time machine, and my time machine were to, be with cards and all the way back to when I started my YouTube channel, literally almost everything has changed. So I'm struggling here because so much has changed. And you said to pick 3. One thing that has definitely changed is when I started collecting, most of the cards that I targeted were 50s and 60s era Hall of Fame type players. I collected modern soccer cards. All the way back to some of my very first YouTube channels, I was collecting modern soccer. Now, I'm kind of a closet soccer fan, especially the English Premier League. I watch some Champions League stuff, but mostly the English Premier League, a little bit of Bundesliga, a little bit of La Liga. But so I collected a fair amount of that. I've sold a lot of it. I've kept a lot of the Americans that I like, but most of that I've moved on. I did really well during the boom in soccer cards, and I kind of got out at the right time because a lot of those soccer cards have come down. But 50s, 60s, modern soccer, and then I've always been a fan of sort of like the mid to late 80s cards, like my growing up era. Now, instead of being, soccer and 50s and 60s, been starting to sell some of my 50s and 60s stuff, and I've been moving older. I've been moving into like some of the pre-war stuff, some of the Gaudis, a lot of T206s. You're going to see my video later this week on my pickups for this month. And again, I have a little bit of everything. In fact, I even bought a modern card this month, and I bought a card from the 50s this month, and then I bought some pre-war cards this month. Again, that video will be coming later this week. And in fact, that's the video where I will first put the link if you want to upload your favorite pickup of the month for the community show and tell video. But so what I collect has changed. Again, it's mostly gone older. Why has it gone to pre-war? I've really gotten to where I enjoy the history of this whole thing. I like looking up players, seeing a card I like, who is that player, reading about that player, getting to know that player, and then targeting those cards. And when it's a card that's over 100 years old, it's kind of fun to hunt for one, and one that kind of suits your eye. So I feel like the hunt is a little bit harder, a little bit more fun when you're talking about the older pre-war stuff. So I've kind of gravitated that way because it allows me to learn more and allows me to hunt a little bit more for the cards instead of picking up cards that are a little bit more plentiful. So what I collect has definitely changed. Now, another thing that has changed for sure is I was always just a PSA guy. Like I never owned an SGC slab before I started my channel. I only owned PSA. And since then, in watching other content and investigating and learning more about SGC, learning more about some of the other companies, I've expanded my horizons, and I do have some SGC holders. I think cards look really good in SGC holders. I think that, the black border that surrounds the card really allows the card to be the focal point. I think SGC does a lot of things really well. I do feel like their grades are a little bit more consistent. We're going to talk a little bit more about SGC and PSA later in the video, so I don't want to get too far into it, but I have expanded beyond just being a PSA slab collector. I've always collected raw cards too. So I was raw and PSA, and now I'm raw, PSA, and SGC. I do actually have, probably 10 cards in Beckett holders. They're mostly modern. Well, they're all modern cards. I do have a few cards in CGC holders, most of which were actually gifts to me, but I have them and they do look good. So I've been more open to different companies that are grading companies than just PSA. Now the other thing I wrote down, as like my 3, because I was like, I had so many in my head. And I'm like, how do I get this to 3? The other one I ended up finalizing on was I collected before on being more of a pack fresh collector. I liked sharp corners. Centering didn't matter much to me. Print marks didn't matter much to me. And to a certain extent, print marks don't matter that much still. They matter a little bit more than they used to. But like the roller marks that you would see, like a lot of the 50 and 51 Bowmans have roller marks on them. Like that used to not bother me at all. Now it bothers me. Centering, being off center didn't matter to me at all if it was sharp corners. And now centering matters more than sharp corners. So I've definitely moved away from pack fresh collecting and way more toward eye appeal. I think part of that is because as I've started collecting older cards, what that does for me is it puts me in a situation where nothing's going to look pack fresh. So if it can't look pack fresh because, a card from a 1915 Cracker Jack is not going to look pack fresh ever. And if it is, I'm not going to be able to buy it. So I at least then want it to have a clean image and have it to be centered. So it's sort of like either or. So as I've changed to older cards and the corners being sharp are almost impossible, it's like, okay, then at least should have this. So let's focus on this. So the eye appeal has become the paramount thing instead of the sharp corners and the pack fresh look. So those would probably be the 3. Well, they are the 3 that I chose. There are more, but you said 3. You were very specific, Mr. Chilson, on 3, and those are the 3 that I settled on.
I follow lots of conversations online about grading cards, and I keep seeing one statement that confuses me. When people ask what company to use to grade between PSA and SGC, I keep seeing the statement, well, if it's to resale, use PSA. If it's for your personal collection, use SGC. I understand PSA resales for slightly more, but why do you not want your collection to be in the slab that will ultimately give you the best return? I understand that PSA takes longer, but what does that really matter when it's for your PC? And I totally understand resellers using SGC so they can get the card back and flip it as quickly as possible. But that's not for a PC. So that's why the statement baffles me. Your thoughts?
Okay, so this is kind of a complicated question, even though it seems like a very simple question. I actually feel that it's kind of a complicated question. I kind of started touching on it a little bit on the last question, and I held off a little because I knew I would expand more here. So here's kind of my take, because a lot of questions I do get. I mean, people ask me, and people, not just me, but in general, talk about, well, if you're not going to sell the cards ever, you're going to literally die with the cards, and you don't care, about what a third party thinks of the condition of your card, then why get the card graded at all, right? And I do think that there are a lot of reasons to get cards graded. Just briefly, it authenticates the card so you know it's real. And I think that most of the companies are pretty darn reliable at that. Do they miss some? Sure. But they're pretty darn reliable at that. It helps you define whether or not the card is altered or not. Do they ever miss some? Sure. But I think they're pretty reliable at that. The other thing it does is it encapsulates the card, protects the card. So that's a good thing that you're now protecting the card. And another reason that I think it's important to at least strongly consider grading is if you're going to die with the card, then whoever is going to ultimately end up with the card is going to liquidate the card, right? And if they're going to liquidate the card, having the card graded makes it that much easier for them to liquidate it, because it's easier to figure out what a 1953 Jackie Robinson in an SGC 4 goes for if it's graded as a SGC 4 than if it's just ungraded. So you're kind of doing a favor for whoever ends up with the card when you're no longer with the card. To the question about why would somebody consider SGC if PSA does seem to have higher values, and it does seem to have higher values. Like PSA continues to have a little bit of a premium over the other companies, and I do believe that premium has been closing a little bit. But it's like, so then why wouldn't, if you're going to get them graded and you're going to die with them, or somebody's going to sell them someday, why not just go PSA, because that gets the most value out of them? I think there's a couple of reasons that you wouldn't go with PSA. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't go with PSA, because I think what you're saying is fair. But you're asking, why would people do it? So I'm going to give you at least a couple of the arguments or a couple of the reasons that a person would potentially go with SGC. I've gotten some cards graded by SGC myself. So what are some of the reasons? Now, number one reason I think is a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people do feel SGC's grades are more consistent. Like there are times you'll see a card in PSA holder and you go, how did that get a 5? I just don't get it. I don't understand it. It really seems like a 7. And maybe you're missing something, but it does feel, to at least to me and to some others, that there are times where PSA has a grade on a card, and the grade variance is sort of like, it could be way down here, it could be way up here. It could almost be like a three grade range, 4 grade range. But with SGC, it seems like that range is a little bit narrower. It does feel like they're more consistent. They're more predictable what your grade will be. So some people would say, well, why go with SGC if PSA grades are higher, or slabs are higher? Well, if PSA gives that card a 4, but SGC would have given that card a 6. Sure, it's the same card. It is the same card. But since some people do buy the grade and lean on the grade and don't just buy the card, then the higher grade from the SGC, and some people, sometimes PSA is higher. That is true. It is sometimes PSA is higher, and then it has the premium on top of that. But what it kind of does is, I do feel like the range is more consistent in the middle than some of the wilder swings that PSA has in grading. Again, that's anecdotal. That's my opinion. Some people think that I'm crazy for thinking that. I'm not the only person that feels that way. But some people think the mechanic down the street is great, and some people can't stand the guy and they think he's, full of it. So it's just a personal preference. I think another reason someone would go with SGC is a lot of people feel that cards look better, especially vintage cards, especially pre-war cards, look better in an SGC slab with that black border. So if they're not really that concerned with value because they're not selling them and they're going to keep them, and all you're going to do is look at them and admire them, enjoy them, don't you want them to be in a holder that you think makes them look best? Like, you wouldn't go buy this beautiful painting, right, for $1,000 and then go buy a cheap Target frame that's $5, right? You want it to be in a frame that makes it look as beautiful as possible. So you might take it to a frame shop and get a very elaborate frame that you think really accentuates that piece of art that you bought. Now, some people like PSA slabs better. They should go with PSA because they like the look better, right? Some people might hate the frame that I pick out. Even the frame over my shoulder here, or my frame over the shoulder here, someone might hate those. But if I like them and I think it accentuates the piece, then that's what I should go with. And a lot of people like the looks of the SGC holder better than the PSA holder. So if they're buying this thing that they're going to look at and enjoy it, they want it to look as good as possible. And if they like the looks of the SGC case better, then that would be another reason somebody would go with SGC.
Question: why do people prefer vintage over modern? Also, why do people buy raw cards and buy high-end cards instead of cards in any condition when, as long as it doesn't look like it's spray painted or in half or something, I think it's fine?
All right, these are fair questions. Why would somebody prefer vintage over modern? And then also, why would somebody care that the vintage card looks really, really nice? Because this person doesn't really care as long as it doesn't look, like a forklift ran over it, right? So again, to me, there are times where I like to look at other situations in order to better understand how I feel about something, all right? So there are some people out there, and some people out there would absolutely love to have a brand new Ford Mustang. Like, that would be awesome to have a brand new Ford Mustang. Like, that would be the car they would pick, okay? Some people would prefer a vintage 67 Mustang, a classic Mustang. Now, the classic Mustang is going to be a rougher ride. It's not going to have as comfortable as seats. The radio and speaker system probably aren't going to be as good. It's going to be louder. It's going to be noisier. But some people would prefer that 67 Mustang. You have two cars, because we know some people prefer the 67 Mustang because some 67 Mustangs sell for more than a brand new Mustang. So there must be a lot of demand from at least some people who want the 67 Mustang. So does it mean that the 67 Mustang is better than the new Mustang? No. Does it mean that the new Mustang is better than the old Mustang? No. It's just a personal preference. Some people like the look, the feel, the experience of the 67 Mustang over the brand new 2024 Mustang, right? So I think it's the same thing with cards. Some people just like the looks of older cards. They like the history of older cards. They like the story of older cards. They like learning about the older cards. Same reason somebody might want a vintage classic car. Now, is the brand new card, is it a higher quality picture? Yes. Is it a higher quality paper, cardboard? Yes. Is it shinier and more attention grabbing? Yes. Does it make it better? For some people it does, and some people it doesn't. I think it's very similar to the car situation. Now, if we were to look at the second part of the question, is why do some people want a really nice one? Like, as long as it doesn't look like it got ran over, who cares? Why does it have to be super nice? We could use the vintage 67 Mustang again, right? Some 67 Mustangs are like car show worthy, right? In Reno, they have these Hot August Nights. And a Hot August Nights, it's this giant car show for like a 3-day weekend. And it's just all these amazing classic cars. You know, there's a big one down in Monterey that is like the Concorde d'Elegance or something. I don't know what it is. It's something I would never even be able to afford probably to attend. And there are people there that are showing off like $1 million cars. And those cars are like pristine. And some people would much rather look at and own the pristine one, even though it's way more expensive. And some people are okay having the old classic car, the 67 Mustang, that's got a little bit of rust around the wheel wells. And the floorboards are kind of, starting to wear through a little bit because the car still sounds good. It's still classic. It's still a 67 Mustang. So some people, the extra premium is worth it for like the premier showpiece. And for some people, just having that car or that card at all is the same thing. It doesn't matter to them. And so it's not worth the extra dollars to get the pristine example. So no, I did not turn into a car channel, but I do think it's a good analogy on comparing classic cards to classic cars. Like, there are a lot of parallels there to help you understand it. So I think it's the history of the older cards. I think it's the story of the older cards. I think that some people like them looking nice. Some people don't mind if they aren't perfect. They just some people even prefer ones that look a little bit like they are old. Like if you're buying a 100-year-old card and it looks brand new, it almost doesn't look right. It almost looks fake. Sometimes a little wear on it, to me, actually kind of looks good. It tells part of the story. So I think that's what a lot of people would say. That's what I would say. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't mean modern is better than vintage or vice versa. It doesn't mean that a PSA 9 is amazing and a PSA 1 is garbage. It just is a matter of personal preference.
Where do you feel that you can get a better deal? At a card show or at a card shop?
So card shows or card shops? I could give a really boring response to this and say it depends, but it does depend. Like, there are always going to be some really good deals at card shops. And there are always going to be some really good deals at card shows. So a card shop, it needs to be selling stuff. It needs to be selling inventory because that's the business. The business model is buy cards for X, sell cards for X plus an amount, and then make a profit. And if they're not selling the cards, then they're not going to be in business very long. So there are times where card shops sell things for good deals because they do need to be turning over stuff to pay the bills, to pay the electricity, the rent, the employees. So there are times that the card shop has the better deals. Now, card shows, however, there's competition. There's a table right next to this guy's table that is selling cards, sometimes the same cards. So in order to get the business, because there's only so much money that's going to come into the room that day. And so if you're going to have some of that money end up with you, you need to be bringing something to the table that's going to make that person spend those funds with you instead of the table next door. So there are definitely times that card shows can have really good deals. Also, a lot of times people at card shows are less attached to the cards. They might just be trying to liquidate cards. Now, if a card shop starts just liquidating everything, they're going to be losing money on every deal, and they're not going to stay in business for very long. But you might have somebody who's just getting out of cards at a card show. They decided to show up to just sell everything off, and maybe there are some crazy deals. So generally, I think the competition of a card show, where every dealer is trying to price things in a way that you're going to hand their funds, the seller's funds, to them instead of to the table next to them, creates a little bit more of a better price point for people. But that's not to say that card shops don't have good deals. I think it's important to support card shows if we want them to continue. We can't just always go to card shows and never buy anything, because then the card shows won't last. Same thing with the card shop. If you want to have a local card shop, you've got to go in there every once in a while, and you need to spend some money. Because if we all just go in there to check it out and hang out and, oh, I'm out of card savers, so I'm going to go buy some card savers, and then I'm not going to come back for a year, they're not going to be around very long. So I do think it's important to attend and actually purchase at card shows and at card shops if we want those to stick around. But as far as the deals go, I think there's certainly times that there are better deals at each. But as a whole, it seems from my experience that the best deals are at the card show.
You mentioned that you use a certain app or sites to get the latest card sales prices. I've wondered what you use for your mind-blowing under $50 card sales. Can you share? Not sure it's worth a video unless you do an episode on determining current card values. That would be helpful for us more novice buyers. I use eBay recent sales, but there must be something else. Thanks for sharing all you learn with the card community and sharing your opinions.
Okay, so good question. I've mentioned before, personally, I have Market Movers app and I have Card Ladder app. Those are the two that I usually find comps. Depending on what the card is, depends on which of the apps that I tend to use. If we're talking like old pre-war rarer stuff, I feel Card Ladder is better because it has a longer history in it and it has a little bit more expansive of a search. If it's anything from, I would say, 1950 to current, I think Market Movers is very good. There are other options. They're certainly not the only options. Now, as far as your question, I think what you're asking me more specifically is, when I am finding the deals under $50, what is the process I go through to find those sales? So what I think would be better to do is, instead of just describing it, I'm going to go ahead and hook this up to my computer, and I'm going to go into eBay, and I'm going to show you exactly how you could be searching for potential upcoming deals on there, and then also how I go through the search to find those deals under $50. So let's go ahead and take a look at my computer here.
All right, so my mind-blowing deals I find in eBay, but if you're just searching for a card for like what might be an upcoming deal, for example, what's not ended yet, and I want to try to find a good deal, you could just type in like 1950 SGC, for example. And over here at the top right, you just go ending soonest, because these are the things that, are going to be ending soon and might have a good deal. So I want to keep an eye on them because, in the next little bit of time, they could be ending and maybe nobody's noticing them. Now, if you scroll down on the left, there are a lot of options over there. And one of them is the minimum and maximum price. So whenever I do the deals under $50, I just put in here $49.99, and then it only finds results that match that are under $49.99. So that's how I find the under 50. Now, there's more to the price. There's the shipping and there's the taxes, but the under $49.99 is kind of just generically speaking about $50 and less is sort of the whole point of the thing. So that is basically what I would recommend if somebody's trying to find an upcoming deal. Now, you could instead just do, PSA 1953. You could you could change it to whatever you want. So I'll go up here and change this to 1952. And, if you're looking for whatever it is that you're into. Now, one of the things that happens is a lot of people mislabel things. So I have these 1952 tops from PSA, and some people mislabel things. So I'm going to check the box of it was manufactured in 1952. So that's going to hopefully get some of the cards that were like 1952 remakes of modern cards out of the way. But even then, there's still going to be some that are mislabeled and are going to show up. So that's always going to be an issue. Kind of drives me crazy. So again, you can always check more filters over here to the left. So there are a lot of options, anything from certain grades to, so when I'm doing this, I type in the year, I type in SGC, and I just go through all of them for the month. It's not a fast process. I'm just scrolling through them, digging, trying to find what I think are some good deals. And there are Hall of Famers in there, all the time. And there are sometimes Hall of Famers in good grades. So again, the settings change over here to the left, depending on what you select. If I wanted to do auctions only, a lot of the best deals are auctions. Or I could click on sold here. So when I'm doing my videos for the month, I click on sold. So these have already happened. And I just go to the start of the month. And then I just scroll through them. I go year by year, PSA and SGC. And I just try to dig out ones that I think are interesting, that are worth sharing with you guys. And so if we're going through here, it looks like there was a lot of 52 tops that were autographed that sold, a bunch of them. But so I just start at the date, the end of the month. And, and sometimes there will be dates that go quickly and others, and I just go through literally until I go through the whole month. So it's not super scientific. It's just hunting around, using a few filters. If you look here, SGC 1959, look at some of these cards that sold for under $50. There's some really cool, look at this. You got cards with Mantle on them and Aaron on them. There's a Clemente, for under 50. It's like, well, it's a low grade. Yeah, but it's also a Clemente. And it's his base card. And, Sandy Koufax, Alkaline. There are deals. And so I just sift through all of them. And then I include the ones I find most interesting and think you guys would like seeing.
All right, so that's kind of the process. Literally, that's exactly the process. Those filters on the left, I think, really help narrow things down for you, not just for past sold items, but also for upcoming ending soon auctions like we looked at the beginning. So 5 great questions again this week. Please, seriously, if you've never asked a question, I really would ask and encourage you to ask one this week. Down below in the comments, do not hesitate. Simply type out your question. And if you asked a question last week and I didn't use it this week, please ask it again in this week's comments down below. I look forward to your questions. I look forward to sharing my opinion, and I hope that I do okay when I share my thoughts.